Hi, good evening. I'm Councillor Ben Andrew, Vice Chair of the South London Waste Partnership Joint Committee. Welcome to the meeting of the committee on Thursday, the 24th of February at 6:30 p.m. So this meeting is being live streamed via the council's website and will be available after the meeting. I'd like to welcome those members of the public watching the live stream and attending in person. As members will know, live streaming the meeting means that we have some different microphones and different cameras in the room. So I'll just ask everyone to make sure they speak up and speak clearly, and always remember to turn on and off the right mics as you're doing it, which I know is easy to forget. And also, of course, as I'm sure we're all polite people, to refrain from talking over each other. That would be fantastic. Secondly, when you speak for the first time, it'd be really great if all members and officers could clearly state who they are for the sake of those watching the live stream. Also, just to say, if for any reason a councillor needs to leave before the end of the meeting, just please let the clerk know. Can I draw your attention to the plan at the beginning of the agenda, which shows the arrangements for the evacuation of the building in event of fire? The fire alarm is a loud siren, and if it sounds, please make your way by the nearest fire exit to the Holiday Inn car park next to this building, just out there. And if you have a disability that could hinder you, please make the person next to you aware so they can provide assistance. I'll now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Tim Cobbett.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sorry, Chair.
Yvonne.
I also give apologies for Councillor Owen Pritchard.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I will give apologies for Councillor Betsy Cummings, Croydon Council. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for alerting us to those. And wanted to ask if any members have an interest to declare, and if so, please do so now. Okay. So the first thing to do is actually to elect a chair and a vice chair, because Councillor Mamal Aglan resigned earlier a month or so ago. So we need to elect a chair of the joint committee. Do I have a member willing to make a nomination for chair? Hopefully towards you.
I'm Councillor Barry Lewis, and if I can nominate Councillor Ben Andrews for chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Lewis. Would anyone like to kindly second that?
Also,
Thank you so much. Okay, fantastic. Is that agreed? Yep, okay, great. Right, we now have to nominate a vice chair, and I would love to nominate Councillor Barry Lewis. Would anyone like to second that as well? Thank you so much, Councillor Sweeney. Is that agreed? Okay, thanks so much. So that's the procedural ignominity done there. We now move to the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, can we approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of September 2021? Feels like a long time now. Yeah. What's that? Okay, thank you. So I'm not aware of any urgent business, so I'll move straight on to the main agenda items, which starts with Andrea Keys and the contract management report AB.
thank you, Chair. Yeah, Andrea Keys, Interim Strategic Manager for the South London Waste Partnership. So this report here is the performance report. It's Q3 performance summary for the following contracts. We have contract 1, which is waste receipts and transfer services. Contract 2, which is our HRRC services. Contract 3, which is green and food waste composting services. And then finally, the Phase B residual waste treatment contract. We've got the update for contract 1 at 1.7 of the report. Contract 1 is operated by Viridor Energy, and this service is operating well. There are no turnaround issues or availability performance failures, and there are no issues to report with the delivery of the service. Section 2 of the report summarises the performance at our HRRC sites, which are managed by Veolia. At 2.6 of the report, you'll see the sites achieved a 66% recycling rate for the reporting period, and this is in line with the recycling rate achieved for the same period last year. And we're starting to see that recycling performance start to move back towards pre-COVID levels, which is positive. The report then goes on to summarise some of the recycling, reuse and customer experience improvement measures that we've been putting in place at the site. 2.9 of the report, we briefly cover the new shop that Veolia opened at Fisher's Farm. The shop recovers reusable, saleable items from the waste that our residents bring to the sites, and the community reuse shop team will then repair and refurbish and sell those. We cover the opening. There was an opening ceremony at the shop, but we're going to cover that a little bit more detail in our comms report later. A booking form system has been in place in Kingston, Merton and Sutton since May 2020. Work is actually still ongoing with the procurement of an externally managed system. That's going to give increased functionality to residents using the booking form system. We've listed some of those improvements at 2.10 of the report. The booking forms aren't live yet, but they are in the process of being tested now before they go live to the public. And we are confident that they're going to be in place before the end of the financial year. Moving on, 2.11, we've just covered the Rubble Charge. That's been introduced at Kimpton. The new policy has seen a significant reduction in the rubble tonnes and has delivered a saving to the council in excess of 16,000 in less than 7 months. There were some concerns that introducing a charge for this material would result in an increase in fly tipping, but we've done some analysis and to date it suggests that that is not the case. So we'll continue to monitor that to make sure that continues. Then finally, for the HRCs at 2.14 of the report, you'll see that we've also introduced a fair use policy at both Kingston and Sutton. In Kingston, residents are permitted 20 visits per year and Sutton a maximum of 12 visits per year. It's estimated that in Kingston, roughly 3.2% of residents will be impacted by that 20-time-a-year limit, and in Sutton, only 4% of residents tend to visit the site more than 12 times. So we feel like the impact on residents will be minimal. In terms of additional contact, to date, we've managed to keep that contact low, and it's a manageable level for the waste teams. And an additional benefit of having this contact is the ability to talk to residents a little bit more about what they could do more to recycle and why they're using the site so many times. So we're finding it a useful contact point with residents. Section 3 of the report, we've summarised our green and food waste and composting contract, and that's also managed by Viridor Energy Limited. There's no issues to report with that contract. And then finally, we've got section 4 of the report, and that covers our residual waste treatment contract with Viridor, Viridor South London. You can see that during the reporting period, and we're looking at April to December, the partnership delivered just over 158,000 tonnes of residual waste, and that's a 2.7% drop on last year's tonnage. So that's a positive downward movement. This reduction in tonnage, it saves just over £400,000 in residual waste disposal costs when you compare it to that spend at the same period last year. 4.4 of the report, we move on to details of the emissions reporting at the ERF. As you know, we provide details of Viridor's emissions on the virtual visitor centre, so it's a very transparent reporting process. The report highlights that following planned maintenance shutdown in April last year, there was an exceedance of the sulphur dioxide 30-minute average, and on the 2nd of May, there were a further 2 exceedances. The exceedances occurred during what the EA term as abnormal operations. So that means a technically unavoidable stoppage or disturbance of the abatement equipment. So during this abnormal operations period, the operator is given a little bit extra time, 4 hours, to rectify. So the Environment Agency do not class that as a breach of the permit. So I just wanted to highlight there that means there were no breaches of the environmental permit for 2021. Again, really positive to report that. Finally, Viridor submitted an application on the 23rd of December 2021 to vary the environmental permit that is in place at the facility. The application seeks to increase the amount of waste that can be processed by 10%, so increasing it from just over 347,000 tonnes to 382,000 tonnes per annum. In response to their application, the South London Waste Partnership published a statement, and I'd just like to read an extract. The South London Waste Partnership boroughs are disappointed that Viridor is making this application just 12 months after the Environment Agency agreed to increase the maximum capacity at the facility by 15%. Whilst the partnership recognises the need for additional energy from waste treatment capacity in London and the South East, as significant volumes of non-recyclable waste do still continue to be landfilled or exported to ERF in mainland Europe, we will want to fully understand the implications that this increase will have. We expect the Environment Agency to view this as a substantial variation to the permit, which means there will be a period of consultation, and we're expecting that most likely to take place in summer this year. This will be an important opportunity for local residents and stakeholders to review the technical information that's been submitted by Viridor in support of that variation, and share their feedback directly with the Environment Agency, who will ultimately make the decision on whether to approve the application. So that's the statement that's published by the South London Waste Partnership. Finally, at 4.10 of the report, we go on to highlight our commitment to work with Viridor to ensure that the contractor raises awareness in the local community and provides opportunities for the public to be actively involved in that variation process with the Environment Agency. So that concludes the highlights that I wanted to take out of the report. The committee are asked to note the contents of the report and to approve the recommendation, the recommended action at 4.10. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Before you go to questions, I'll just really quickly make a slightly less important comment, just in case there's any eagle-eyed residents who are trying to get onto the link. I think there's a typo in the link to the emissions data on page 10. Betting, that's fine. It's just missing a T, so it's fine. Just if anyone goes through and tries to click the emissions data, so that's at 4.4, and it's
Thank you.
it's not a big deal at all. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to check if there's any councillors who'd like to ask questions. Yeah, go on, Councillor Lyons.
Thank you very much for the report. I'll say one question and come back if nobody else has any other questions, because I don't want to manipulate everybody's time. But I'll probably just start with the ERF and us and the idea of the increased capacity. My question is, have there been any examples where it's similar sites where they've applied to increase tonnage and capacity and local resident opposition has prevented that from happening? And how is there anything else we can do to prevent this from happening, basically, other than giving out strong statements and pushing for a public consultation?
Okay, to answer the first question, have there been other instances where a permit variation to increase capacity, have they been successful? Yes, there are examples where they have been successful. I'd have to get back to you in terms of the facilities, which ones have been successful and if any haven't been. I don't know off the top of my head, but there are other facilities, both Viridors and other waste operators that have applied for and have been given increases in capacity similar to this. So it's not unusual and it's not the first of its kind.
I think my question really is around, has there any, if you might not know, but if there's a way where, if there's any examples of where local opposition has really done anything to stop this from happening?
I will have to come back to you on that. Yeah, nothing that comes to the fore, but I will come back to you on that. I'll have a look into that. I think it's a good question. Okay. And your second question was around what can we do in terms of, so the Environment Agency will look at these applications on a case-by-case basis, and so they will be coming to the public for consultation. So they will be taking views of the public. What that will entail at the moment, we don't know, as I say, because they do take each on a case-by-case basis. So I think what the proposal is one of the boroughs will be writing to the Environment Agency just to understand what the process entails and what involvement we can have and what our feedback, what kind of feedback we can provide and what kind of concerns we can raise and the best way we can raise them. So I think it's very much a matter for the Environment Agency. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a matter for the Environment Agency. I think we all know that, but I'm just wondering what can we do more to not pressure them, but to lobby them and to state our case that we ultimately have that site to deal with waste from the partnership and to deal, and then, it's in a location that's sensitive. We don't want to increase the traffic around there. And not have control around the kind of vehicles that are going in there, because for all we know, that extra capacity is going for other commercial ventures that we have no control over. And I think that being in the heart of one of the partnership, within the partnership, I don't think is particularly fair for us to carry that burden for Viridor to reap that benefit. So I'm just wondering what more we can do as a partnership to kind of show our feelings around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Viridor's submission has been submitted to the Environment Agency, and that will include their technical submission and the details around traffic movements, and it'll also include assumptions on vehicle types and vehicle numbers. And so I think once we've got access to that data, that will enable us to make more detailed and informed comments and consultations on that process. In terms of what specifically that could be, I might look to my colleague John and see, what your view is on that.
Yeah, John Haynes, Communications Advisor for the partnership. So, Councillor, I think the point that you're making is a good one. I think this will be quite a formal consultation process, a bit like a planning consultation, and it won't be just kind of, there'll be certain things that you can say that have an impact and certain things that are irrelevant, no matter whether they're important to you or not. There will be things that hit the buttons and things that don't. So we need to establish what those things are and how we can maximise them, don't we? So, like Andrew said, we're in touch with the Environment Agency. We're writing to them formally to ask, what does this consultation look like? How widely will it be advertised? How will the EA make residents aware that it's happening? Because then we can look at what we might need to do to supplement that first of all, as well as just making residents aware. It's how do we respond and what are the things that we choose to focus on that are actually going to most likely to have an impact that we want. So
I'll stop talking now. Sorry. Will we then be able to do our own analysis? Because I understand, I don't know how independent the analysis is that is put forward by Viridor, so I'd like to know what we could do to contribute to that. So if we're looking at traffic patterns, for example, I want to know that's come from something that's been quite independent, or it's something that we're leading as a partnership, because we understand the roads and the layout there more than anyone else.
Yeah, the traffic assessment will have been undertaken by a company employed by Viridor, but as I say, when that technical information becomes available, we'll be able to interrogate that and we'll be able to look into that. And if there's further analysis that you wanted to do on that information, then yeah, you'd be able to do that. And as John said, depending on the process the Environment Agency chooses to take, will kind of dictate, the level and the ability we have to push back or comment on any of that data. But we will, as I understand it, get full access to that technical submission.
Thanks so much. So, Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. I think just following on from Councillor Hyman's question, understandably, the regulator, the Environment Agency, will do what they need to do, and they'll take into account different factors. But contractually, what is it in our gift that we can do, apart from writing formal letters and informal letters and telling people that this is not good enough for us? What is it, sort of practically, in the contract that allows us to use, or whatever, I don't want to use the word power here, but what is it that we can do in our capacities to kind of influence the outcome of the regulator's decision?
What leverage do we have?
Yeah.
So it's important to note with our contract, it's a residual waste treatment contract. And so it's not specifying that the asset is a transferring asset, so it remains, so it's very much a commercial facility. Yeah, so it's a residual waste treatment contract through which Viridor have built the ERF in order to treat that waste. So in terms of our contractual leverage, in terms of what they do outside with their facility, we are quite limited, but we have a relationship with that contractor. It's a long-term relationship, and they are very aware of our position in regard to this application. And so it is a really fine balance that we have. But yeah, it is a long-term relationship, and that's the main leverage that we have in terms of influencing their actions.
Thank you.
And Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thanks for the report. So I've got a little moan, a bit of praise, and a concern.
Okay.
So the little moan is the booking form. We say in here end of January. You now said end of the financial year, which is April. So we're talking, I know what IT like, we're talking July, aren't we? What guarantees are we going to have that it will be up and running sooner rather than later, because it is really frustrating for residents. And yeah, it's a short delay is okay, but this will be 3 months. A little bit of praise. I think it's great we've saved £16,500 for the rubble, the garden rubble, and good news as well. There's no evidence of increased fly tipping, so I think that's worth noting, worth commenting on. Concern, I suppose it's what we're being asked to recommend. 4.10, and thanks to both my colleagues for what you said, because I think very, very important. We're saying the SLWP proposed to work with Viridor to ensure the contractor raises awareness in the local community and provides opportunities for the public to be actively involved in the consultation process. Difficulty we've got is we're sort of both going to be trying to spin it, crudely speaking, different ways. And it's going to be quite difficult. We can work together, obviously, but I think, do we need to note something in this recommendation that we're conscious of this? Because otherwise, there's an implication that everybody's happy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'll start with the first question on the booking forms. Yes, I share your frustration. We were very confident about that January start date, obviously, which is why we put it in the report. We did want to do some final testing, though, of those forms. And I think that's really important before we go live, just to make sure there are no issues and no gremlins there. And there is a lead-in time for the supply of equipment for the sites. So we are confident that we will have it by the end of the financial year. And I am very, very mindful that Easter, the Easter weekend will be coming up. And that is when the sites get, incredibly busy. And that's when we absolutely want the new forms to be in. And we don't want it going live Easter weekend either, because that's obviously the bank holiday weekend. So absolutely share your frustration. Feel very confident that it's going to be done before the end of the financial year. So we can minute that, and I'll come back to that at the next committee meeting. Your second comment on the rubble. Did you want me to respond to that? Sorry, no, just highlighting it.
Really just highlighting. I think it's important.
And then, yeah, I completely agree. In terms of working together with Viridor, it's really using that relationship that we've got with Viridor to ensure that they make as much effort as possible to make the technical information available. If people want to have site visits, for example, I mean, it really does depend on the response that the EA give us in terms of the breadth of how that consultation will run, and then we can see how we want to supplement that process and how we can encourage Viridor to offer up information or site visits, etc. We're not sure what that support will be, but yeah, very mindful of that. We'll be coming from different angles, but it's about transparency of information, I think, more than anything.
Can I come back? I mean, do we think we need to make some adjustment to recommendation 4.10? I mean, I don't know what, but it's colleagues got any ideas?
Would it be feasible and possible and logical for the SLWP to really have more of a lead in terms of the community response? Because my understanding of technical data is I won't understand it at all, because I am just somebody who wants to get rid of my rubbish. So could the SLWP be the ones to kind of decode that technical information and lead the consultation amongst the community? Because ultimately it's, you're the bridge between Viridor and the partner boroughs. So I wonder if that's an approach we could take.
Yeah, we can absolutely look at that in terms of translating that technical information and putting it into everyday language. I think that's something that we can commit to with Viridor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the paragraph you're referring to, I agree. I take your point completely that that Viridor will have a different objective to this from us. And I think there are two things to bear in mind. First of all, like Andrew said, there may be some things we want to do where we have to involve Viridor, because it might be that we want to get people to the site to visit it, so they have a better understanding whatever it might be. So we don't want to kind of alienate them from the process, but I agree that the promotion of it and the awareness raising probably needs to be led by the partnership with the support of boroughs. I also think it's really important to point out, though, that let's say we organised some sort of public event or public meeting, people that come along to that can express their views in that meeting, but I think we have to make it really clear that that this is an EA consultation and that this is an awareness raising event more than a consultation process itself, because there's a danger that people will say what they feel to us, but not to the EA, and that's not worth anything because it has to be to the EA. So I think it's more of an awareness raising campaign of the consultation.
Yeah,
We don't want it to feel like another consultation.
Sorry, I mean, the partnership could help people construct their responses, because we know that there's sort of formal consultations, there's a very set way of responding, and that can be quite a barrier to a lot of people to responding. And maybe the partnership could help, again, with the decoding of that, how you respond to a formal consultation so that more people feel that they're able to.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
agreed. Perfect. I've made a note of that, and what we'll do is we'll circulate some wording. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Fab, thanks so much. So I'd like to make a couple of comments if no one else, if everyone's complete. I think it's really, really helpful to hear from councillors Lewis, Ali and Irons on that. I agree with what's been said. A couple of things I just want to highlight. So first of all, as we've said, this is ultimately a matter on the permit between Viridor and the EA. And I sort of, we appreciate that we are kind of a relevant party, but not a decision maker. It's difficult. Which kind of leads on to, I completely agree about the consultation. I think you make lots of really good points about helping people in general fill in these consultations to decode it. I think what we would then need to be really careful to do is to explain clearly what our objection is. And I think the objection is traffic and congestion and the air quality caused by that damages. Because I think obviously with a facility like the ERF, and I know because I see it from my house, most people don't notice it's there. Some people have concerns which aren't necessarily true, but because obviously the ERF is inside, as we heard earlier, it hasn't had any breaches in 2021. It's a thorough cleaning process of what comes out of the chimney, and I wouldn't want us to accidentally alarm people by raising lots and lots of concerns about something without being very clear about what it was we were concerned about, because there's no concern about the ERF. It's monitored every 10 seconds rather, and it's not outside boundaries. So I think if we want to be super clear that it's about traffic and congestion, and traffic and congestion is a big deal, and it has big problems on air quality, and I'm not chuffed with it. And we'll know that lots of us in our boroughs have been doing all sorts of things on traffic and congestion, I'm sure, all the time. So it's not me minimising, it's just me trying to be sure we're specific about what the problem is, and making sure that that's made super clear so that we don't accidentally, through goodwill, accidentally end up igniting things we actually don't want to ignite, because actually we're alarming people about something that's not the problem. So I think that's just my only steer on that. And then also it'd be really great to what Councillor Lyons said about being a bit of an expectation manager here, but yeah, on the my other concern is we've had consultations before, I know in Sutton, where I felt like we've accidentally, through trying to engage people, raised expectations that it's going to make a difference. So I'd love to look into the EA's any track record the EA has, because otherwise you're well-meaningly helping people through a process which you're just like. So if I think it'd be really great to get that guidance to help people, and I think if we have a look and we look at other cases and we think, you know what, this is an absolute slam dunk, there's no way they're going to turn this down, then maybe, or if we think, oh, there are some problems here, they actually really need to represent this, that might, in my mind, affect the toning up or toning down of the conversation. If we think, God, this is actually, they've gone over there, what they said they were allowed here, they've pushed over the line on that, they've done this twice in 2 years, and that somehow affects it, then I think, absolutely, let's blare that and let's get a response. If we think it's a slam dunk, then I'm sort of like, okay, we still put the terms, we still allow people to respond, but we maybe don't lead everyone down a path that we know around. So those are my only thoughts. Obviously, just to say, obviously no one here is happy with this, and it doesn't really bring us any benefits with the SLWP statement, but I suppose there's not too much we can do, and we're all doing our best to tackle traffic and congestion in all the ways we can, including this. No answer was required, Andrew. It's just my little sir. I don't know, you want to come back to the slides? Yeah.
I had another question about something else. So, okay. So yeah, sorry to change the subject. On the HRCs, so when we were talking in the paper about customer satisfaction and things like that, I'm wondering, have we ever done any kind of secret shopping with disability groups and how they find the use of these sites and the kind of assistance they get when they get there? So I'm just concerned that we may be missing people with our kind of general consultations, and I imagine that actually a household recycling centre may be quite a difficult place to navigate if you've got a disability, or if you're partially sighted. I'm just wondering if you've been in touch with any disability groups from any of the boroughs to do some secret shopping and just to get their recommendations on how we could make them safer and better for all our community, really.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. We do have special assistance in place for people who come to the site who can't use the stairs and the gantries. But have we done a secret shopper with any disability groups? I'm going to say no from memory. I don't believe that we have. I think it's a really good suggestion, and to get that feedback on what they find challenging and useful, I'm going to look at John.
So I think I pressed my button too early. I think it's a good idea as well. Definitely something we could look into. Just to reassure you, you're right. Yeah, by doing the surveys on the site, you're only interviewing site users. So you may be missing the people that are excluded from using the site. They don't have a car, might be they're disabled or whatever it might be. That's why we also every 3 years we do our resident survey across the 4 boroughs, which we get done by an external market research company to make sure that it's representative and that includes all of those groups. And we ask questions around satisfaction with HRC services in that as well. So we do make sure that we pick up people that don't necessarily use the sites very often in there. So I could go back, for example, to the last survey and drill down and look at those groups, those specific groups, and see what their satisfaction with the sites are. I could certainly look into that for you if that would be of interest. But that's not to say I still think it's a good suggestion as well to work with those groups and see what we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll take that as a second action. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I think we're looking for the recommendation. I just wanted to check. We had a chat earlier about the one recommendation. What I kind of heard was that there was a concern about the how we would work with Viridor, and you kind of explained that we would we would sort of be facilitating site visits, and we would put some of the text in ourselves to help residents in other ways. I just wanted to check, is that assurance enough for us to move forward with recommendation, or do you want to propose an amendment?
No, I'm happy as long as it's clearly minuted our concerns, then I'm happy with that. Colleagues are.
Why wouldn't we amend it?
Yeah, well, it's a bit clear. Propose amendment, feel free.
I mean, I haven't formally written one down, so I could, off the top of my head, I could propose that we the partnership decode the language of technical language that comes out of the application, and that the partnership provides guidance to the community around how to respond to a formal consultation. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, if you put in 4.1, we could say the SLWP proposed to work with Viridor to ensure the contractor is aware to the community, and then say and also work internally to support residents responding to the consultation. So then it kind of lays out that we're doing stuff separate to Viridor as well, which I think was I'm just trying to help with the wording. I don't know.
Would you like me to send some wording round, and then we can agree some wording? Do you want me to take my notes and put something together and send the wording round?
Yeah.
Would that be helpful?
That'd be great.
Well, yeah, Chairman, Matt Smythe, Partnership Director, South London West Partnership. I just wondered if I'll give you some words and then see if they're any good, and if they're not, then Andrew can then spend a bit more time on it outside the meeting, but potentially. But I think what I'm hearing you saying is that the South London West Partnership takes a lead role in enabling residents to engage positively with the EA consultation.
That's great.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
So do we have a proposer for that amendment?
I'll propose.
Yeah, Councillor Irons, do we have a second? Yeah, go ahead. Second, Councillor Irons. Thank you. Okay. So do we now vote on the amendment and then the whole thing? Okay, so do we have,
If everyone agrees to the,
we're all
it was just worded.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, great.
We don't need to do a vote.
Yeah,
We don't agree.
Okay.
Let's continue with the other recommendations.
Okay, so we're happy to accept all the recommendations now that one's amended?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Andrea. So we move on to item 6, the SLWP draft vision and work programme with Matty.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so the report in front of you responds really to what's in the inter-authority agreement, as members will know that then the inter-authority agreement requires an annual action plan to be agreed by this joint committee, which historically has been on work that is around waste disposal. Taking a view this year that actually the interconnected nature of all of our work around waste management, whether it's collection and disposal, means that we're bringing our whole work programme for discussion today for you to comment on and help shape. The first part of that, though, that we've put together in section 2 is a draft vision. We think it's a really useful thing to start the conversation as a partnership to say, where do we want to be as a group of authorities in 2030? So, and that draft vision enables us to have a work programme that then leads into delivering that vision. So section 2 outlines the draft vision for 2030. You can see in there the words carbon neutral, cost effective, those sorts of words. So we'd really welcome some feedback and kind of thoughts on what that vision might be. We're not saying that you're then committed to that today. What we're saying is that that's then something we can then take into further forums with members and with officers across the partnership as we do our transformation work. When we get into our work programme then in section 3, we've split that into 3 sections, as you'll see. Number 1 is around transforming our service. There's a huge amount of change coming, as members will know, with the National Waste Strategy, the Environment Bill, etc. And we have a number of contracts that are coming to an end in 2025. So change is coming, and we want to make sure that we have the most effective service that we can have. So therefore, part of the work programme is around how we can deliver that transformation agenda. But that's jammed tomorrow in some ways, and the authorities need some savings today, as we're very cognizant of. And so what we've then said is, what are the areas of work we can put together to improve service on the ground today? What can we do to improve performance today? And there's some work around the improvement. And then underneath that, as a foundation stone, to enable all those things to happen, we need to make sure that we're optimising our kind of bread and butter. How are we doing our finance work? How are we doing our contract management? How are we looking at health and safety? Those sorts of areas of work. So we've layered our programme in those 3 ways. So the rest of section 3 then sets out a series of objectives for those 3 different headline areas. And then you'll see then in the annex then, in terms of convincing detail, then there are a series of actions that deliver the objectives, that deliver that agenda. Something else to say then is Annex 1 then sets out a bit of narrative around that vision. So really interested in what members think about that narrative in Annex 1. Very happy to take any questions on any of those actions. Final point would be that obviously I've got a work programme item today to talk about. I've got a future budget item to talk about. The 2 are clearly very much interlinked. So we can't sign off the work programme, but then say we don't want to spend the money. Obviously the 2 come together. So we can kind of decide how we want to play that depending on the conversation and how it goes. So yeah, really happy to take any questions on the work programme, Chair. Really interested in any thoughts on it. And really interested in thoughts around that vision as a starting point to do more engagement. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much, Matthew. And were you saying it might make sense for you to do number 7 and then for us to ask together? Was that on the 2 items? Was that?
Yeah, I could do that. I mean, would that be helpful to do the budget, to roll straight into the budget?
Is that all right? If we're happy to approve without more, just note, that's fine. Is that okay? We move on to 7 and then ask questions about both.
I think that's very sensible, Chair. We're trying to work out, is it 1 item, is it 2? I think it's 2. It's kind of, they're very interrelated. So as members will know, then annually, then you agree the annual budget for the partnership team for the forthcoming year. Normally we need to do that by December. Circumstance and COVID meant that we weren't able to do that, but brilliant that we're here today to be able to have that discussion. What you'll see in the budget is a series of considerations at section 2, where we've historically had a team that is very much there to manage contracts. But as I've just set out in that work programme, there's a load more work we need to do. We need to be set up to transform and change what we're doing, and we need to be set up to make those improvements, to make those cost savings. So that's something to be aware of. As I've already mentioned, the National Waste Strategy is coming. Exactly what's going to be in it isn't exactly clear right now, but it is coming. Change is coming, and it's going to be either giving us some money or costing us some money or a bit of both. And we've got to be prepared for that. We want to be on the front foot for that. We want to know what we think the financial consequences of that should be before government tells us what they think those financial consequences should be. So it's really important to have that in mind. And the final point I already made talking about the work programme, there is a real opportunity now. We've done our homework. We've looked at some of the improvement work we've done in the past where we have saved money, and we've looked at what we can scale up and what we can do in the short term to put some money back in our bank accounts. So section 3, so I've split the budget into a few different sections. So section 3 is effectively that comparison to previous year's budget. What is the budget that the partnership team requires to manage contracts effectively and to do the optimization type work? So you'll see that there's quite a shift from advisor and corporate support costs into core staff resources. Members will be aware that the partnership team has been under-resourced for a period of time, and we've been relying on external advisors. And now we're at a point where we can make that shift back and we can then staff up. I think that's more cost effective, a way of going forward. So there's a small increase in that core budget based on indexation, based on some annual increments, and looking again at how staff on costs are calculated to make sure that number's right. So there's a small increase in the core partnership budget that I'm asking you for today. Section 4 then talks about that other work, that transformation work and that improvement work. We believe that there's £170,000 worth of work that we think would be incredibly useful to understand our waste system better. So I've called that intelligence gathering. At the moment, we haven't done an analysis of what's in our bins for a number of years. Government are saying, the National Waste Strategy says that producers of materials will need to pay for the ultimate disposal of that material going forward. In order to do that calculation, we need to know what we have. If we don't know what we have, then government will say, oh, you've got 3% of plastic, here's a little bit of money. No, we've got 9% because we've just done our analysis of that. So composition analysis is hugely important, I think, for us to be well equipped to understand our position with the National Waste Strategy coming. And it also helps us commission services more effectively. If we know what we have, then we know what we want going forward. Carbon is a priority for all of you. It's a massive priority for me individually and us collectively. I want to understand better the carbon cost of all elements of our service. I want to be able to give you as members the opportunity to understand, if we change this, what does it mean? If we change that, what does it mean? How do we prioritise our service changes? Is it better to recycle more or electrify our fleet? Is a question that I want to get some answers on. Nobody's really got those answers yet, and we want to do more work on that. And as John has already mentioned, we do a resident survey every 3 years to understand what do residents think, what do they believe, what are their attitudes, what are they prepared to do, what are they not prepared to do, and that's part of our intelligence gathering work. Alongside that, then we want resource to be able to get us set up to commission a collection contract, our recycling centre contract. We've had infrastructure that is on the way out, etc. We've got a lot of work that we need to do over this next 2 or 3 years to be ready for all of that. And that's the resource that I'm asking you for today to help us with that. But I appreciate that you haven't got a load of money to give me. So therefore, we've done a load of work to look at what improvement work can we do. And you can see that there's some contract improvement work that is well underway. We think we can do more work to get more green waste recycling going, more food waste recycling and plastics. And then when we net all of that off and we look at the opportunities to save money, actually there's a real saving to come out of that. And then table 3 in section 4.5 shows you that we're projecting savings in the region of £1 million from that investment in improvement work, which offsets our commissioning work. I think I've said plenty on the budget, Chair, and on the work programme, but no doubt there'll be questions, and if there's anything I need to go into a bit more detail, I'm really happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for those 2 items. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Matthew before I say anything myself? Yeah, go on, Councillor Lewis.
So, yeah, I mean, from what I understood, the 3 bits of the work programme, summing up, it's carbon neutral. You want to cut costs and improve performance and communications. And the last bit is basically making sure everything works, and the reporting systems are up to scratch, etc. Got one concern about the wording carbon neutral. It sort of gives one a little bit of a get out, because you can just plant a few more trees and you make yourself carbon neutral. I think we need to be clearer about what our carbon aims are. In other words, net zero, carbon zero, but be more precise than just using carbon neutral. Comment read, page 25, we talk about stakeholders. And I think we just need to make it clear that stakeholders do include all our residents as well which it doesn't in there. And this is a question I'm a bit hesitant to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. I'm new to this committee. How is the cost apportioned amongst the boroughs? Is it just a straightforward way split? And that's always been that's how it is, and it's been agreed and discussed. Okay.
Shall I go back on those three questions, Chair? I think that's I really would like to get into where we want to be on carbon as a group of authorities. I'm still kind of getting up to speed with the scopes. I suspect you might know a little bit more than me on those, but the waste that is collected that we collect from our residents isn't going to be included in our scope 1. It's not going to be included in our scope 2. I don't even think at the moment it's included in our scope 3. It would be about the carbon, what's the right word? The carbon envelope for the area, so the boroughs, but it wouldn't be included in the scopes of us as authorities. So that language, I think deciding what we want carbon neutrality to be, I think is a really good point. So if we agree that we want to go as far as we can with carbon in terms of the vision, and then we can then do more work on that together over the next few months, I'd really welcome that and to try and create that clarity. I think that's why I make a point around stakeholders. We can absolutely make that change in the work programme, and residents, I think we meant that, but we need to be more explicit. And then, yeah, as Andrea said, then cost apportionment historically has been equal share. There's no kind of partnership share calculation that we've had historically in the partnership. Have seen elsewhere where you would look at the value of your contract, and then that becomes your partnership share as a proportion. We don't have that here, but it's all about change going forward. It's all about how we want to work together going forward. And so if we think there's a different way of doing that, then absolutely, I think we should look at it. But right now, it's equal shares.
Thanks so much, Councillor Lewis. Was there anyone to add again, Councillor Irons?
Thank you for the report. That's this practice kind of thing of carbon. I mean, it is really important because I guess as John Doherty talked about is sanity versus vanity. So when we're talking about recycling targets, that's great, but actually the recycling targets is driven a lot by the garden waste subscription. And if you're really trying to reduce carbon, what you want is people to compost at home and not necessarily subscribe to the service. So I wonder if there's some kind of carbon calculation that we can have around so our residents can understand what it is what their contribution is to carbon in the world. If there's a kind of carbon calculation we can work out, and by resident or I don't know the technicalities of it, but I just think it's really important for us to sense check that sanity versus vanity sort of thing of are we chasing recycling targets, or are we chasing a genuine reduction in our carbon footprint? And then on that, then a lot of these savings to improve are based around us getting maximum value out of our garden waste subscription service. Again, then what are we going for there? Because if we do get the garden waste subscription service firing on all cylinders, technically we're expanding more carbon to do that. So just kind of that tension, how do we really want to do this? We're going to have to start really asking ourselves those kind of tricky questions. Otherwise we're just going to go around in circles, I think. And I think that's what I wanted to raise really.
I really like that idea about once we've been able to baseline our carbon, the carbon of the system, being able to then try and turn that into something that is kind of a per resident carbon calculator. And then if you produce less stuff, whatever that stuff is, then your kind of carbon envelope comes down. I think that's a really nice way of thinking. Once we've got that data, how do we make it as understandable for our residents? Because carbon is this stuff is so complicated, and it feels very embryonic as an industry to me in terms of how these calculations are done. It seems to be changing on a sort of an annual month, almost a month by month basis, how to do these calculations. So I really like that idea. We should absolutely take that forward when we have that raw data. Is that conflicting with trying to generate more garden waste subscribers? I don't think it is. My experience tells me that there will be a wedge of garden waste currently in our residual bins. I don't know how much, and I don't know if I'm right or not until we've done our composition analysis. So effectively, I'm bringing forward some improvement projects that ideally I'd like to have already have a composition analysis. We all would like to have that composition analysis first to go, right, okay, let's target that material, let's target that material that's in the residual. I have a sense that there will be a chunk of it in residual bins. So therefore, moving it from residual into recycling would be a carbon benefit, if that's true, but that's my guess, that's my sense. If we're stopping people driving that material to a recycling centre, and instead the truck that is driving past their house anyway, it gets tipped onto there, and I think that would be a carbon benefit as well. Should we be doing more work on home composting instead of generating money out of our, or trying to get more customers for our garden waste collections? I would really like to do that. And I think that if we call this a sort of year one improvement program, pretty embryonic, bread and butter, try and get a bit of money into the system, demonstrate that it works, demonstrate that these things, that's there, build those relationships, get a bit of momentum, make it more sophisticated next year, etc., to get more into waste reduction. I think that would be a really positive outcome. I feel like right now, in year one, given that we're going to be investing so much in our transformation program, I need to give you a few quid back to be able to pay for that transformation program. And I don't think this does it in a way that is carbon negative. I think it's still carbon positive, but not as carbon positive as I think I'd like this program to be going forward once we've agreed that vision and exactly where we want to be on carbon at the point that Councillor Lewis made earlier, which is a very, very good one.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Councillor Allen and Councillor Sweeney. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just a couple of comments. I think almost every borough recently announced or in the process of announcing climate emergency, and then they have gone on to produce some net zero carbon plans or carbon neutral plans. In Croydon, we opted for the carbon neutral plan recently, and I think most boroughs are probably working in isolation or in silos to do something about their carbon emissions. And I think this partnership, as you quite rightly said, has some role to play. One of the fundamental challenges we had in Croydon when we were socialising the idea of carbon emission with public and residents is very little awareness, very little understanding of what their role is in this. I think probably most people think if they're doing recycling, they're doing something great. Reuse is probably not on anybody's agenda. Circular economy is not talked about or encouraged and possibly supported by what we're doing with here. And I think the point you made about the environment bill and carbon neutral plans in the future, there may be slight conflict between what is expected of us in the future, what are we currently set to do. And I think that's really important that you do that work. I think we should be mindful of how we align the very nature of this partnership and how that then reacts to the future challenges. And it has some financial implications as well. But I would like us to be bold and kind of forward-looking to actually work on a circular economy resource plan rather than calling it waste all the time, which is quite an old terminology that we kind of stuck with. So I think if that kind of boldness is coming across in future plans, I'm very excited about it and very supportive.
Can I come back on that? Thank you very much for that comment, Councillor. I think that's really helpful. Actually, I think, John, could you just say a little bit about the plastics work that we're looking to do and the carbon side of that? 'Cause I should have said that earlier, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that as well.
Yeah.
So, Councillor, you're right. There's a lot of education that needs to go on to raise awareness of carbon and how, at a household level, the impact that we all have on carbon. I think part of that's the reason that confusion exists is because it's almost flipped on its head in the last few years, because looking back, over the last many decades, when we sent waste to landfill, the most damaging bit that we sent to landfill was all the biogenic waste, which is the stuff that decomposes anaerobically and releases methane, which is 25 times more harmful than carbon. So it's all about getting the food waste and getting the green waste and the biogenic waste out of the waste stream. Now, we know that the energy recovery facility, the EFW, is generally much more beneficial, is less carbon intensive than landfill, but also the other bit in the mix is that it's flipped it on its head, and actually the biogenic waste is no longer the stuff that we should be more worried about. It's the plastic, which is the issue in the ERF. So it's not it's not surprising that people are confused, because it is confusing, isn't it? Because we've chosen a different and better treatment route, it's completely flipped the message on its head. That's not to say that we're suddenly going to say it's fine to put food waste in your bins. Absolutely not. Because there's still far better things to do with it. But we really need to hone in on that plastic and really push that message home. And it's not a new message. Reducing your plastic waste and the amount of plastics you put in the bin is not a new thing that we've been saying. We've been saying it for years. But I think the motivation for doing it is now so much clearer, and we can really hone in. We're planning to do a campaign later in the year. We've got some money to do it, so that's really good. And it's going to be focusing on that plastic message, but very directly linking plastics with carbon and making people aware, not just the plastics that they can easily recycle from the curbside, but also all the other stuff, the soft plastics. There's more and more outlets now for your soft plastics, reducing the plastics in the first place. And so just trying to, it's interesting when I go and stay at someone's house there where they live in an area where there's no food waste collection, I actually feel really guilty. It feels so wrong to put food waste in the bin. You feel awful. And I want the same feeling with plastic. So that's the objective. It's not going to be done in 1 year, but we're going to certainly start. So.
Thanks very much, John. Councillor Srwp, do you recommend?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to reinforce, I think, what some of my colleagues have been saying about perhaps the future work that in terms of the vision that we're trying to do. And I think listening to what has been said, I think each borough probably feels that we have a huge task and we're not maybe well equipped to make the right decisions, or to understand maybe what best practice is, and what is everybody else doing. So I mean, we in Kingston, I mean, we for example have made a budget decision where we're going 100% electric vehicles on our waste fleet by the end of this year, and we think that is going to have a big impact on our carbon footprint as a council, but then obviously there's lots of other things going on in the borough. We're also wrestling with some of these other challenges around, it seems to be, when we look at the statistics, that the volume of waste is creeping up and up and up all the time. And it's partly because more housing, so there's more people living in boroughs. So it becomes very difficult to sort of know which numbers to chase after. We want to increase recycling rates, but as is mentioned, that might not, that sort of has mixed results. So I think what I feel that we need is some very kind of considered and shared approaches to these quite thorny issues, and that we can maybe work more collaboratively and get down into the detail of it. And also I think the other challenge is that the council, we account in our boroughs for a very small part of the waste that is produced in those boroughs. And there are, commercial waste contractors who are collecting waste from commercial premises, schools, hospitals, other institutions that are somewhat not really on our radar. So we're looking at these numbers, and they're not actually the true picture of what's going on. It's much larger than what we're seeing and saying. And then I think on top of that, we have a number of national players, whether they be, supermarkets or retailers or other types of businesses, who are quite, have a huge role to play in waste reduction. And I think as an individual council, it's very difficult to try and challenge those behaviours. So I would be thinking that, perhaps there are some of these big issues that we can tackle together and try to get some of these very wasteful, we all know, we talk about them, we know what they are. How do we actually start to address them? And maybe by working more as on those sorts of issues that suddenly, you know, I know that this organisation has emerged around waste contracts, but I feel that there is perhaps a role that maybe steps away from that and tries to actually address, you know, waste reduction, and getting everyone to you know to carbon neutral, which we're all working towards over the next 10 years or less, depending on what you've signed up for.
Thanks, Councillor. Do you want to come back to
Yeah, thank you. Chair, I think that's a really positive, Councillor, I think that's a really positive statement. I entirely agree with you that there is more that we can do together around future strategy, around influencing others, around waste reduction. I think communications generally is something that doesn't respect any kind of border, whether it's a borough border or a county or London itself, or our channels don't work like that. I think the more we can collaborate around our communications and engagement work, I think the better. The more we can do it, be lined up around how we engage with others around strategy, the better. I entirely agree that supermarkets have a massive role to play. One of the roles that has been vacant within the partnership team for a long time is a strategy manager. Our new structure that we're recruiting to at the moment has a head of strategy and commissioning, where we want to have a team that is doing exactly as you say, Councillor Sweeney, engaging with the right groups across the country to lend our name and our message and what we think locally to support people like RAP and other bigger bodies to get into some of those supermarket discussions. This week, Morrison's have gone from milk bottles to Tetra Packs with their milk. So they're really pleased about it. You know, they're shouting from the rooftops, look, we're putting our milk in Tetra Pak. Well, we can recycle those milk bottles. We can't do anything with them. We can't do it. It's pretty difficult to do that stuff with Tetra Pak. We can recycle it, but it's difficult. So we're going from an easy material to recycle to a more difficult material, for example. We want to be able to try and influence some of those conversations. So entirely agree with that. My rule of thumb tends to be commercial and industrial waste is about the same again as household waste. And then construction waste tends to be even bigger again. So you're entirely right that we've probably got less than a third of the pie that we're managing. So yeah, let's get that bit right. But then what else can we do to try and influence that others? And I think your statement, Councillor, about how we, as a partnership, we can just do more together. Obviously, I would say that that's a good idea, but you know, I'm all about partnership. And I think that, you know, the more we can do together, the more impact we'll have.
That's right. That's a really interesting point made around the room. I've got nothing else to add to it. So the recommendations that we can all see, do we all go on?
Chair, can I just clarify something? It might be for the officer. What does it mean by endorse? What are we actually saying? The meeting I've been to, we've either had to agree or note. I've never had to endorse something, so I need to make sure I know what I'm discussing.
Thank you. It's a really good point, and we talked a bit about that language. So the constitution of the committee is around waste disposal, as you will all know. Now, this work programme and this vision, I think, is hugely important for members to be talking about, but isn't directly within the remit of the committee for a decision. So what we will be doing after this, if you say that vision looks okay and we'll endorse it, but subject to these things, and we'll take that away as a steer. And then when we're then working with you all individually and then bringing you back together in workshops, etc., then we'll have that steer from the committee because they've endorsed that vision. Similarly with the work programme, I work for you. The remit of the committee may be disposal, but I work for you, and so I want that kind of sense of whether you think that whole work programme works for you as well. But that's why it's an endorse rather than an agree. I don't know if that helps or not. Really, it's the complexity I think of our governance arrangements. But to me today, it means a lot. If you endorse it or you don't endorse it, it's not a decision, but it'll absolutely be what we take away and do work on, because as I say, we work for you.
Thanks for expanding on that. On that note, are we okay to endorse items 6 and 7? Happy to endorse. Nodding 100% endorsed, Matthew. Thank you so much. Right then, so we have item 8, which is the SLWP partnership budget update from Michael.
Chairman, could I just thank you for endorsing agreeing those two recommendations on the work programme item, but as I did the budget item as well, that's, I really wanted to agree that today.
I'm sorry, of course, yeah.
So yeah, there's a series of recommendations and there was with some numbers against them, so if we could have a look at those on,
Sorry, I've got
page 29, that'd be brilliant, I think that's good.
Okay, if everyone's had a chance to have another look, are we happy to endorse as well? Thanks so much, got nods for it.
This is an agreement on this one, Chair, sorry to be pedantic. So I should have been clear when I introduced the item, I do apologise, so because the budget, the committee agrees the budget each year, then you agreeing to that today means that is the budget, if you don't agree, then that's not the budget.
So I
should have said that. when I introduced it.
Yes, that was my bad, my getting tongue tied in the different types of agreements. We've got an agreement here and we're all happy to agree.
Great, now.
And we're endorsing the strategy and commission budget and the improvements budget. All the different labyrinthians agrees versus.
Thank you so much. Agreed and endorsed.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Agreed. Okay, item A. Yeah, the partnership budget.
Yeah, sorry, I know that's got Michael's name on it, Chair, but I said that I would just introduce that item today and let Michael stay at home this evening. Pretty bland sort of report in there. So end of Q3, we're projecting that the partnership will spend its budget. Michael has set out in in fact, he's gone to month 10, hasn't he? So slightly over end of Q3. Section 2.3 and 2.4 just sets out a little bit about what I was talking about with our budget for next year, where there's a movement from core staff into advisors for the reasons that I've already described. So that's the case this year, where we've got vacancies and therefore we've spent more on advisors. So there's a shift in spend between different budget lines, but we're projecting that we'll be on budget for the end of the year. And members are just asked this time to note the contents of the report. So we're covering all the possible adjectives today as to what we'd like you to do with these different items.
Thanks, Matthew. Does anyone have any questions or will be happy to note? Noted. Is noted here. Over to the final item, and John.
Thank you, Chair. This item provides an update on communications and engagement activities and focuses on the period between September and January. So some of this stuff goes back a little while, but it's been a while since we met because of the slow December meeting. So going back a while, kicking off with Recycle Week, which does seem like a long time ago now, back in September. But just to remind you all, the theme was the link between recycling and fighting climate change. So it ties in a little bit about what we talked about earlier, about that link between carbon footprint and recycling behaviours. Just to remind you all that we secured £4,000 of funding from London to help us deliver a campaign locally, a social media, paid for social media advertising campaign. There are some photos of the campaign just to jog your memories at the top of page 36. And I can report back now, I've got some sort of top level results there from the campaign itself. So 500,000 people reached across the partnership region, just under 1 million views, and particularly interesting, really sort of high levels of engagement of people sort of liking, commenting, forwarding, over 52,500 post engagements. So I think that campaign was very successful. You always get these huge numbers with social media campaigns, but of course it's difficult sometimes to drill down. I like to think of these campaigns as kind of creating that background noise that you can then sort of layer your local comms on top of. So bit of an update there for you. We also, during Recycle Week, our partner Veolia ran some face-to-face engagement events as well. One in each borough. There's a photo there sort of set up, so I think that's kept the marketplace, it looks like. And they spoke to 159 residents, particularly focusing on that link between recycling and climate change. Section 2 of the report gives you an update on the South London Waste Partnership website. The website for the partnership was launched a long time ago, in 2010. And yeah, initially the site was launched to focus on waste treatment and disposal, and in more recent years, it now sort of reflects the wider remit of the partnership. And also, we do use it for some of our partnership-led campaigns, things like Plastic Planet and Destination Recycling. Have driven visitors and residents to that site. The site's not had any significant investment since it was launched, and as a result, it is sort of showing its age rather. There are two particular issues that need to be resolved. The first is it's not responsive in its design, so it doesn't work on mobile or sort of handheld devices, which is clearly something that needs to be put right, because a very high proportion of people now visit websites on those sorts of devices. And the other issue is that it doesn't meet the current accessibility requirements, which again is something that we need to put right as a matter of urgency. So we are in a process at the moment. We're going through Kingston's commissioning process to get an agency on board to do an audit of that site, particularly around the accessibility issue. Make sure that we get a specialist agency that can really help us with that, make sure our site's as accessible as possible, but also use it as an opportunity just to refresh it, make sure the messaging is up to date, all that sort of stuff, and that it reflects particularly things, some of the newer issues that are coming around, like that focus on carbon rather than recycling rates. I think that would be a really good opportunity. So yeah, I will bring an update. We're looking to get an agency on board by the end of this month. We're well into that process with Kingston, and the hope is to get the site launched by May. So I will keep you updated at the next meeting. On section 3, HRRCs, I remember the last time we met, councillors asked, I think particularly you, Councillor, if I remember rightly.
Obsessed with them.
No, it was a very good suggestion. We talked about the surveys that we do on the site, and we talked about adding some questions in there about some of the newer stuff like the booking forms and the reuse shops at Kimpton and Fishers. So we've done that. Those questions are now included. We've been asking them since January. It's still fairly early days. We've had around 100. I downloaded the results a few days ago, and there was around 100 responses. So it's quite early days. But so far, just to give you a bit of a sneak preview, we're getting quite high satisfaction with the booking form system. So about 95% of site visitors say that they found it easy to book a slot, and 96% are satisfied with the availability of slots. And obviously, you know, the improvements that we've got coming online should drive that even higher. And in terms of the reuse shop, good feedback from Kimpton. 62% of people who go to Kimpton say they have actually been to the reuse shop and have used it. So that's really encouraging. Lower than that for Fishers at the moment, but it had only been open a matter of a couple of weeks, I think, when we started answering the questions. So I will let you know more about Fishers as more information comes through. And talking of the Fishers Farm reuse shop, there's a photo there of Councillor Ali. I think you're in there somewhere in the group at the launch event. It looks like the weather didn't really play a part in there, but I won't go into too much detail because Andrew's covered it in her report, but we provided some support, as did Fiona, to promote that shop. And obviously, it'd be good, we'll use every opportunity we can to remind residents that it's there. Moving on to section 4 and the Bennington ERF, sort of section paragraphs 4.3 down to 4.7 focus on carbon. It's still a big kind of focal point for us. There was a steering group meeting that we had in November. The chair of the committee attended that. Obviously, the chair has since left, so it's a invite, I suppose, to the new chair that if you'd like to come along to those meetings, I'm sure you'd be more than welcome. We are doing further work with Viridor to refine our baselines and to look at those annual reports. I think Matt mentioned earlier that it is very much an evolving industry, and I think we published something last year that was our best stab at the time, but I think we're always looking at trying to refine that. More information is coming in. Just as an example, diesel use on the site, there are lots of different ways that diesel is used, and it depends there. We're now looking at, can we split that down into kind of fixed and variable carbon? So just to give us a much more sort of refined view of that. So more coming hopefully at the next committee meeting on that. But just to let you know that there's a lot of work going on in the background to try and collectively get our heads around carbon. I think it's really critical because the baseline that we set will be the measure for the next 25 years, a long-term contract is, so we need to make sure that we get it right and get it accurate. So the 4.7 linking into Viridor's announcement, I'm sure you're all aware, but back in October, Viridor announced a partnership with carbon capture specialist Acre, and they are already at work looking at how they can install carbon capture technology at their biggest facility, which is in Runcorn. This is part of their kind of corporate commitment to become net zero by 2040 and net negative by 2045. We are working with Viridor to look at what that means for Beddington. There are some opportunities, but these carbon capture facilities are big things in their own right. So there are some issues that we need to look at and consider. But Beddington is certainly on the radar in terms of exploring the options and seeing what that might mean going forward. So I think that can only be positive. I think to be exploring and looking at that. So. Andrew's talked about emissions. I was going to point out the fact that there had been no breaches in 2021, which I think is worth noting. I've made the point at 4.9 that actually up until the 15th of January, when this report was written, there hadn't been any exceedances during that period either. So we've talked about the permit variation, so I won't go into that again, but we said that we issued a partnership statement that went onto the website, and it did result in quite a lot of press coverage, particularly in the trade press, quite entrenched in the fact that the boroughs and partnership had expressed such a strong view, and so the trade press were quite interested in that. Section 5 is a new section actually, and again I think it ties in with something Matt talked about. Although the collection side of things isn't formally under the remit of liquidity, I often find that when I'm talking about the communications, it's difficult because I want you to see the wider picture because they're so interlinked and interdependent. So I've included just a summary, and hopefully it's useful, and I will continue to do it going forward. So just to provide an update. The key sort of priorities over the last few months have been around the driver shortage, trying to do whatever we can to improve the situation. Obviously, it's primarily an issue for Veolia to resolve, but we're supporting them and doing what we can. So we've been providing daily updates for the boroughs that are most affected by the driver shortage, Sussex and Croydon. And those updates continue and will continue for as long as they need to continue, hopefully not too much longer. But just to make sure that residents at least are aware of the disruption and what's likely to be happening and what the priorities are for each day. So we're also running a driver recruitment campaign. There's an update on the social media campaign that was really effective actually. So that ran from the 26th of October to the 13th of December. And we had a target of 2.5 click-throughs to their careers website. We actually got nearly double that, for just under 5,000 click-throughs to the dedicated recruitment website, which is very positive, and it did lead to a noticeable increase in applicants actually coming through the doors for sort of training and the interviews and stuff. And I'm sure you've all seen the size of the trucks. I've got the messaging on as well. So there is a lot going on. We are working on the next phase of that campaign. We're going to try some radio advertising, but we're looking at targeted advertising. So this is kind of people that are listening to the radio on their kind of apps and on things like SoundCloud. The reason we're doing that is it means we can target really specifically. So we can target people that live in the 4 boroughs, but not only that, we can target it at people that we know have cars, for example. So we know they're drivers, they have licenses. So we're going to be keeping that up for the next few days, and I will report back on how that's gone. 5.5 talks about the collection calendars, which we produce every year. There are 83 versions. I think I mentioned that last time, which is extraordinary, isn't it? But when you add them all up, you've got your Monday A, Monday B, Tuesday, Tuesday flats above shops, communal. It's quite a challenge. So we produce those calendars every year. Hands up, they came to the boroughs a little bit later than ideal this year, and we've committed to getting them to you in October this year, so that your web teams have got plenty of time to get those uploaded and all the stuff that goes on in the background to make sure the right calendar gets given to the right resident when they log on. And we also produce the annual service reminders, the kind of the newsletter and leaflets, which I attached just in the appendix, just so that I think it's interesting for you all to see what everyone else is doing as well. Everyone takes a slightly different approach to this. Croydon have a printed calendar, although I think it might be the last year that I think you're looking to go on to the downloadable digital version from this year. Merton incorporate yours into your printed resident magazine, and Sutton and Kingston sort of go down this sort of newsletter approach. So slightly different delivery mechanisms, but basically the same concept. It's an opportunity to I think the key thing is just to make sure that every year residents get that service, that sort of, page reminder of what goes where. And I know it's a really kind of high level thing, but I just think it's really important to just keep pushing that out. Flats above shops, we're rolling out a recycling flats above shop service in Kingston, so we're supporting that at the moment, and we're also looking at how we can improve the way the service is run and delivered in the other boroughs. And yeah, that's about it from me, I think, really. So the request is that the committee notes the contents of the report, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have.
That was very thorough. Thanks very much, John. That was really good. Any questions from others on the area? Councillor Irons.
Thanks for the report, John. It was really good. My question is around Recycling Week and how or just the recycling kind of messaging and stuff that we're doing around that time. Have we got any analysis on brand awareness of Re-London? Because I have a theory that it would be a far more powerful message if it looked like it was really coming from the boroughs, and because I don't think residents really know what Re-London is. And would it be better for us to take that spend and just split it between the 4 boroughs and go hell for leather and on making it all branded, looking like it came from the boroughs itself and the partnership by extension?
Yeah, well, Re-London is a relatively new brand, isn't it? They renamed themselves from the London Waste and Recycling Board, but I think their consumer facing brand is London Recycles. That used to be Recycle London, now London Recycles. So a lot more positive than forward thinking. But I think it's an interesting point. I think Re-London are a very good source of funding. They are contributing quite substantially to the waste composition analysis, for example, that we're doing, because we've agreed that we're going to be a sort of a trial area for they're developing a new protocol because they want everyone in London to do waste composition analysis in roughly the same way, so that we can get a London view as well. So we've agreed to sort of take their sort of templates and their protocols on board, and in return they're giving us quite a nice amount of money. So there are definitely some benefits to being involved with Re-London, and I think they do some good work. But I think London Recycles is quite a well-known brand, and I'm sure they've done some analysis on awareness levels, so I could certainly find that out. But yeah, whether we want those campaigns to be more sort of partnership or even borough level, if that would have more impact. Maybe that's something we could ask in our resident survey, see how residents feel about that, if it matters to them. I think this particular campaign, if I remember, we would usually take a slightly more lead role, but at the time the HGV, the driver shortage, was really hitting quite hard. And I think we felt a bit uncomfortable. We didn't want to not do anything for recycle, because it was still really important for it to recycle. But we also appreciated that the service that people were receiving perhaps wasn't up to the usual standard. So it was felt that Re-London kind of was maybe the better mechanism to deliver that message in that particular time. But we could certainly look at playing a more leading role. I think when the services are running normally, we would want to very much lead that message. Yes.
Thanks a lot, and thank you, Councillor Irons. Do you have any comments?
To this one very quick comment. I'd just be very interested to see how the targeted advertising through SoundCloud and local radio stations works. I was fascinated the other day. I was listening to the radio on my Google speaker, and there was an advert for Marks and Spencer's kale for Marks and Spencer's ready meals came on, and it suddenly said, "And go and get them from your BP store on Carshaw Road." Yeah, it's scary, but yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, I am as well. We're not spending a huge amount. We're just dipping our toe in and seeing how it works, as we often do. But I've actually, believe it or not, a few years ago I did something similar with TV and targeted TV advertising. Sky do something called Sky AdSmart, which and they so you could say, you know, I want to target people who live in Sutton, but that own a cat. And it means that you might be watching the same TV program as your neighbour, but you're seeing different adverts. Some people might think it's scary, others might think it's quite useful because there's so much noise in the world today that maybe actually only seeing stuff that's of relevance to you. There's no point in us advertising an HGV driver role to people that don't drive. So from our perspective, it's a very useful tool to have. So yeah, I'll certainly report back at the next meeting how that's going.
The scary anecdote afterwards. Any other comments or questions? Nothing from me, apart from just to thank you very much, John, for that. Right then, we are at noting, aren't we? That's it. We noted. Yes. Thank you. I don't think there's any other business or any AOBs. So yeah, thanks a lot for making the journey to Sutton on a very, very cold temperature.